Okay, folks, this is another episode of the Wright Flow Show. The Wright Flow Show, and like I always say, you have to get your mind right in order to get your money right. And today's guest, we have Steve Corbett. He's a branch manager of Home Vantage Mortgage. I'd like to thank you, Steve, for being on the show. And just, tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I guess you and I have known each other for what, 8 or 9 years now, 7 or 8 or 9 years.
Yes.
And I think we first met because you were doing a lot of reno rehab and flipping homes, if I'm right about that.
Yeah, rental rehabs, wholesaling. Yes.
Yeah, and still do that. And so anyways, I have been in the mortgage business, I guess now for close to 27, 28 years.
Awesome.
I started when I was, I think, 29. And so I always tell people, if you can't take a joke, don't get into the mortgage business, right? But it's actually been a really good career for me. And
that's awesome, man.
I've worked on both sides. I've worked on the corporate side, and I've also been out in the field, which is kind of where I planted myself right now.
Nice, awesome. So, why did you decide to get into to mortgages? What made you become a mortgage?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, and this might sound a little bit on the funny side, but I actually got into the mortgage business because I wanted to be self-employed. I wanted to be independent. And my dad and my grandfather both were entrepreneurial. And so they were in the agricultural sector, and my dad and my grandfather owned a animal feed manufacturing plant. And yeah, when they sold it, I think back when that happened, but there was a feed plant and it was worth a couple $1 million, and they had big trucks and lots of equipment, right? And they owned farms and all of this stuff, and probably had a capital investment of $7 or $8 million.
Nice.
So anyways, they sold that. My dad got my grandfather retired, and then my dad got into the horse business. And I had a real love for horses too. And but I came to find out real quick that if you don't have money, it's hard to be successful. And if you're successful and you work for somebody, my first full job when I was 20 years old paid $800 a month plus housing.
Wow.
And so, that was I'm 58 now, so that was a few years ago, but it hasn't really changed a whole lot since then, right? So I decided pretty quickly that I wanted to get into something where I could have really an unlimited, I really wanted something that was unlimited as far as making a big income was concerned. And I wasn't the kind of guy that was a college student. Like I scraped through school by the skin of my teeth, and kind of got out of high school. I loved to play sports, but I didn't care much for the academic side of things, which is kind of interesting because my brother, so I'm the oldest in my family, and my brother, who is younger than me, we were both the same way. And then brother number 3 and sister number 4, brother number 3 ended up getting a PhD, and sister became a highly successful HR lawyer.
Oh, wow.
And so anyways, we kind of both took 2 different paths. And the reason that I got into the business, I sold life and health insurance first.
Okay.
And that was a really good education about selling and learning a craft, right? So I always thought that some of the best sales education in the world came from insurance companies.
Okay.
Because nobody really wants to buy life insurance, right? nobody wants to think about what life insurance is for. And so anyways, we did all of this training, and I went to work for Mutual of Omaha at first. So the Wild Kingdom guys, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I ended up being what they call a top of the table producer in my third year, which means, so you've heard of $1 Million Round Table?
Yes.
Well, top of the table is on top of that, and that's about as high as you can go.
Nice.
And you know what? So insurance was good. It was a really good gig, but most of it was all night work. And so, and then Mutual of Omaha, where I work, got sold, and the whole culture of the company changed. And so I wanted to do something a little more, something different.
Right.
And so without having millions of dollars to be able to capitalize a business, I was like, well, the only thing I really have to buy is a pen, right? And a calculator. Right. So if I have a pen and I have a calculator, I'm basically in business.
Nice.
And so that was in the day before you had to license. It was kind of like the wild west back then.
Right.
And an interesting story along those lines is that I worked for I was holding down a regular job, and I was doing mortgages at night, and probably did it for, I think, around 6 months before I even wrote my first application. And of course, back then, there were no computers. You know, everything was a handwritten 1003.
Right.
And you sat down with clients and you did the interviews and you collected the documents while you were there. And then, you know, you went back to your office. So anyways, I worked for 6 months, and I really wanted to go full time.
Nice.
And so anyways, I ran a little inch ad in the news classified sections, and it said, if you've been turned down, give me a call. Turned down the mortgage. And so I worked for some really smart guys in the business who knew how to structure loans properly. Right. And so anyways, another couple months went by, nothing happened. And then finally, I was running my little ad, and I had a guy respond from up in Kokomo who worked for Chrysler, him and his wife. And so anyways, he called me and he said, hey, I want to refinance my house. And it was like a beautiful house. So back like 30 years ago, it was a $200,000 house, right? Which was a lot of house for Kokomo. Right. And so anyways, he only owed like $30,000 on it or something. It wasn't much. And but he was probably 10 years away from retirement. Right. And so he was telling me all his retirement plans, and I'm listening to this go on. And so finally I said to him, I go, well, listen, you want an RV? Let's buy one. You want a boat? Let's buy one. And you wanted to do a couple of little things. And I'm like, let's get the cash out of your house, because back in those days, there was a big interest deduction for homes. Okay. So a big mortgage interest deduction for homes. So anyways, we got him a boat. We got him a really nice RV. We got him a couple other little toys that he could play with. And we ran that mortgage up to 160,000, I think. Oh, wow. And so anyways, it was at the time, interest rates were, I think, 6.5%. The interest rates we see today, I kind of have to laugh, because now at 6%, people are freaking out. But for about 15 years, when I was writing mortgages, 6% was a little bit below average. Oh, nice. So anyways, I didn't know. I was so green. I didn't know that you had to lock the interest rate on a loan. Oh. And so I quoted them at 6.5, I guess, which was kind of market rate at the time. But then that summer, it fell all the way down into the high 3s. And so he was happy at 6.5%. I didn't know I could lock it at 3. So I ended up locking the loan a couple days before closing at 6.5%.
Wow.
I ended up making $18,000 on that transaction.
Hmm.
And of course, 30 years ago, $18,000 was a lot of money.
Right.
And that was enough money for me to live for the next 6-7 months. And thank goodness, because I didn't write another app in that 6 months. So I almost went a whole year, right? 6 months, wrote that big sale, another 6 months. And that was really the money that I was able to use to learn.
Okay.
And so the biggest issue in our business is that people don't treat it like it's a career.
Hmm.
And it's a craft, right? So people
Right.
get in it when it's really good, and they'll, one of those times we just went through times like that where you could fall down and write a loan,
Right.
right? It was that easy because interest rates fell so hard. But when interest rates fall like that, then our business becomes like a commodity. It becomes like grain or sugar or, any other commodity. And the cheaper the commodity, the more that people will jump in and purchase, right?
Right.
The guys that stay in this business, like I've been through 3 big downturns, going into my 4th here. The
Hmm.
guys that stay in this business are the guys that have learned the craft of it and have taken that and turned it into a career. So there's a difference between guys that are order takers and the guys that actually learn how to do this business. And
Right.
so, that became apparent to me pretty quickly. I had a chance to work with some really good mortgage finance guys when I was younger and learned a lot.
Hmm.
And kind of my philosophy is if I could found somebody that I thought was really smart in the business, then I would ask them if I could carry their briefcase around for a while.
Oh, wow.
Basically, that was just to learn, right?
Hmm.
So there was a young guy in Carmel that was my age, and he was an account wholesale rep for a subprime mortgage company at the time, and one of the smartest guys that I've ever seen in the mortgage business.
Hmm.
And so, anyways, I hung around him and learned from him, and kind of really started down a career path by just hanging around guys that were really good.
Nice. So what would you tell someone that's looking to get started in the business, or maybe having some opportunities, struggling?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I kind of take the position that come on in, the water's warm,
Hmm.
right? It's been a great career for me. So I raised 8 kids.
Wow.
I went from kind of humble beginnings to living in big huge houses and
Hmm.
having that lifestyle and doing all of that stuff, being young and foolish, right? And
Right.
the big thing about this business is it's great, but you've got to be a people person,
Hmm.
and you've got to be able to take rejection because there's a lot of it. And then you got to figure out how are you going to generate business. Okay.
Right.
So I don't care what avenue you're in sales, right? Insurance, real estate, mortgage, cars, whatever.
Hmm.
When you get into sales, what's the most important thing when you're a sales guy? Are leads.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Because what people need to understand is that if you've got the right amount of business or leads coming in, it's all a numbers game.
Right.
So for instance, if I look at 100 leads, I know I'm going to write 10. I know I'm going to fund 6. And I just know that every day every month I've got to get up and I've got to generate X amount of leads, right?
Right.
And so if you do that and you work those things consistently, and that's a big thing that people don't understand. So I've had a lot of young people come and work with me over the years, and they might work really hard for a week and they'll get a loan. And then you kind of get this reaction they'll have that loan file and they'll go, this is my loan, this is my baby, and I'm gonna stick with my baby until it's come to full grownness, right?
Right.
The problem is on the back end of that, there's nothing coming behind it.
Right.
And so income can ebb and flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what your source of business is and where your source of leads are, that's the hardest thing in getting going. So I, wore out quite a few pairs of shoes, walking the concrete into real estate offices and, meeting with realtors and, a seasoned realtor will be able to sniff whether you're a greenhorn,
Right.
coming 10 miles away, right? So then how do you overcome? So learning about how to overcome objections and getting a really good, solid knowledge of how sales work. So what helped me is I decided that I wanted to understand the psychology of a sale.
Nice.
And so as I was going through that and learning about the 4 basic different personalities and being able to pick out what kind of a personality a person was really helped me, because I know now, didn't know right at the beginning, but know now, like I have strong A personality, right?
Mm.
So when I look at things, I look at the big picture, right? So
Okay.
it doesn't matter what I'm buying. I look at the big picture and I say, does it fit what I need? And we'll worry about the little stuff later. Where I really used to fall down was if I would sell somebody who was technically gifted like an engineer, right? Because an engineer wants to know, where does this washer go and what bolt are we using here? And I'm sitting there going, why in the world are we having this conversation?
Right.
This is good for you. Take it. Now, it would have been good for him, obviously, but not selling to his personality meant that I wasn't explaining everything that he needed to understand to be able to make a decision, right?
Right.
So probably one of the best things that I did was take, some really good sales training courses, really try to understand the psychology of sales and how people buy and those kinds of things. And then, I just got to the point where I was so good at it that, I could, you could tell me no 10 times.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm going to walk away and you're going to sign the paperwork and you're going to feel really good about it. Right.
Right.
But when you do that, it's a big burden on a person, because you can get so good at working with people that you got to make sure that still at the end of the day, there's a benefit for that person, that it leaves them in a better place than they were before they started doing business with you. Right.
Right.
So I learned, pretty early on that, what technique of sales worked really well for me and my personality. So they call it the Columbo sales step, right?
Right.
Well, you might remember who Columbo was, but a bunch of people on your podcast may not, right?
Right.
So the best way to put it is Columbo, the police detective, would be questioning a person, and then he'd go to walk away, and then he'd turn around and he'd go, oh, by the way, can I ask you one more question? Right. And so I found with that technique about just the more questions that you asked and the more that you understood about your client's position, then the better off you could serve those needs. And, eventually, you come to the point where you just close the sale, right?
Nice.
When I had a lot of people working for me back when I was in my late 30s and 40s, it was kind of fun to just amaze them how, they would say, well, how did you do that? How did you get that sale? I used to take the young people along and just say, listen, I just want you to sit there and listen.
Nice.
So you don't need to have a college education, but
Right.
you need to educate yourself.
Gotcha.
right? You need to know
Yes.
about the market. You need to know about the system, how lending works, so you can explain it to people in a way that they can understand it. And in particularly in our area of business, when you look at a client and you look at a transaction, there's really three things that people have to get qualified for, right? So the
Right.
house has to qualify. So that's why we do an appraisal and inspection.
Right.
We have to know what debt to income ratios are. So we need to know how much somebody makes, and that's usually X, right? We know what they make. Then there's credit. Well, credit is the wild card in our business. Anybody can write a 700 credit score mortgage, right? I mean, you can fall down and do that, but your bread is buttered when you can actually go in and help the clients that are marginal. And once you learn how the credit system works, and once you realize how to take a client from being maybe below guidelines to above guidelines to qualifying,
Right.
that's when you've kind of learned your craft. And I've got I call him a kid now. He's 30 years old. He just turned 30.
Nice.
Just bought his first house, just had his first kid, right?
Nice.
And he's been with me now for 2.5 or 3 years, and he's still learning, right? And sometimes I take for granted that he knows something and he doesn't know it. But I know it because I've written so many loans, not just the 700s, but the 580s and the 550s and the 610s. And I've written so many loans over the course of my career.
Right.
That I know where the pitfalls are. And once you know where the pitfalls are, then you just have to compensate for them, fix them, and figure out how we're going to do it. And then it takes a willing customer, right?
Right.
And sometimes a lot of our customers maybe aren't totally willing when they realize the amount of work that's involved. So then we become coaches.
Right.
Right. And we're the rah-rah guys, and let's go do this. But
right.
I remember probably after the third year of my career that I closed a loan on Christmas Eve for 8 straight years. And you know what, like, that was kind of fun, and I hated it when I snapped my record. But if you can learn and get a good foundation, then when people talk to me now, I never lose a client because I can answer all their questions, and people have confidence in my ability and my knowledge of what we're doing, right? So when people start, man, you got to get in, you got to learn, you got to put in the hours, you got to put in the loans, you got to, the more experience you can get, the better it becomes for you.
Gotcha. So looking back at your business, what would you say, what would be the best month that you had, like most deals closed, and how'd you do it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it kind of depends on, what you're talking about as far as the business. So on a personal production side, I'll probably, if I get 2.3 million in the month, that's really pretty good for me.
Right.
If the business does 15 million to 20 million a month, then that's about where it should be. Okay.
So what habits would you say contribute to your success? Or do you have like a daily success plan, something that you do every day?
Yeah, so basically I'm a bit of a formula guy, right? So like I come in and I do the same things every day. I had a really good friend that was a recruiter for Fifth Third Bank one time, and she told me, you want to eat all your frogs first thing in the morning, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, it's all the things that you don't want to do, right? Do those first. So when I come in the morning, I've got my little routine. I'll look up and see how the markets did. And you don't have to be an expert by any means, but you just kind of want to keep up on the financial news.
Right.
Where are things going? What do things look like? I'll look at all my emails, and then I'll prioritize stuff. I like to get rid of those fires as quickly as I can in the morning. And then typically in the afternoons, it's all prospecting.
Okay. Nice. So what does your team look like?
So back in the day when I was young and foolish, I had the largest my team ever got, I think, was 105.
Wow.
And that was having offices here in Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and Wisconsin. And so today my territory is bigger than those few states.
Right.
But I probably do 75% of the work those 100 people did now with 5.
Nice.
5 or 6. Yeah.
So
7. There's actually, sorry, 7. There's 7.
Okay. So with your team, did you build it, or did the company provide it for you, or you built it all yourself?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story, right? So I grew up in a very religious, conservative religious home. And, come from a lot of a lot of uncles and cousins that were preachers.
Right.
And of course, you know what, everybody always had this thing about talk to somebody about Jesus, right?
Okay.
So my big thing is I started talking to everybody about loans.
Right.
And corporate people really don't help you on the team building trail or the recruiting trail. Now, they want you to recruit because this business is a volume business, right? So the more volume you produce, the better you are, the more concessions you'll get.
Right.
All the way up the line, the more money, the splits are bigger, whatever, right? So they want you to recruit, but we have done, I think, not a very good job in our business of bringing in some younger people and training them and getting them up to the point where they could, make a good living for themselves and move on, right? So it's like with anything else, you could come into a new business and be all excited, but if you can't pay your bills at the end of the day, it becomes a very miserable thing pretty quick, right?
Right.
So what I did was I started to look for people that had some kind of a sales background, and I didn't really care, was it tires, was it widgets, what that sales career was. But I tried to recruit people that had some people skills. And anybody that's kind of been in sales will always stop and listen to you. So they always say that the easiest person to sell is a sales guy, right?
Right.
Easiest person to sell. But I would look at skills like that and then talk to people and, kind of share with them. And I actually liked guys that weren't originally in our business that I brought into it, for the simple reason that I would work with them and they wouldn't have any bad habits created.
Right.
If that makes sense, right? And then teach them a system and how that system works. And then because if people will work a system, all systems pretty much work.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Where systems fall apart and fall down is when people don't do it the way the system demands it.
Right.
And they try to put something of their own in there, a different way of doing things. And systems are typically successful if you do it the exact same way. So with me and our system I worked on developing that sucker for, 5 or 6 years, right? Till the point where it just got, it was cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching all the way along.
Nice.
So, I would look, if you're new, I would probably go to work for, somebody that kind of had like a call center, maybe,
Right.
but also had access to the good mortgage guys and the processors so that you can go in and learn how to structure a mortgage and how to do it properly. And what I found out going from 100 people down to 7 is that I make almost the same money, but now I have 90% less liability.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so everybody's kind of close, and we're a very tight-knit, close-knit team. And but I've recruited everybody over the years that's ever worked with me. Yeah, I think big companies aren't very good at. So learn recruiting, right? And I learned from one of the best guys. There's a guy in Florida by the name of Chuck Cowan.
Okay.
And when I was working for Movement Mortgage on the corporate side of things, they spent a lot of money in training and recruiting and how teaching recruiting and all of those things. But it works best of all.
What's that?
When you take your W-2 and you can hold it up and say, this is what I made last year, or what would you like to make?
Nice.
Right. And then you're not, you're actually putting your money where your mouth is.
Right. Nice.
So that for me, that was a big thing, was coming up with a system and the leads that, as long as you consistently work them every day, it'll produce so many apps, so many fundings, so many checks, right? And then for me, I work backwards. So I say to all my guys at the end of every year, when we do kind of a year-end recap, what do you want to make next year? And depending on the guy, if they say, well, listen, I want to make 150 to 200, then we can go back historically and say, okay, you need to take this many apps per month in order for you to achieve your income goals.
Right.
So that's kind of how we did that.
Nice. So wrapping things up, so if someone wanted to contact you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I think they should come through you.
Come through me?
Yeah. Get a hold of you, and then you know what, I can pay you a referral fee for putting me on today. Right?
That's awesome.
I mean, we work, I work for a company called Home Vantage, and you know what, at this stage of my career, so I'm 58 years old. I don't know that I want that many employees anymore. It's a big responsibility, right? So here's a good story for you. When I had 100 employees one time, just the way that the checks fell and the days fell, and there was a couple of holidays in there,
Right.
I got about a week out from payroll and I was like $75,000 short.
Wow.
Those are the things that make you gray, like I am, right? So
Jesus,
in my exact position today, if I had somebody that was hungry enough, yeah, I would hire somebody like that.
right.
But they would need to show me that, hey, they were really committed, and they would want to stick to it, have a lot of stick to itiveness.
Right on.
So if somebody wanted to reach out to me, that would be fine, but come to impress.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you for the interview, and it's very valuable for the people that's listening and watching the show. It goes to show you get involved, become a mortgage broker, unlimited income. You don't need a college education. As Steve says, if you have some stick-to-itiveness, some persistence, and really
little street smarts, and you're in good shape.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And that'll be concluding of the interview, man. I just, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing all the information with the people that's watching or listening to the video or audio.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Armand. You know what, I've really enjoyed our business connections over the last, 6 or 7 years. It's been a lot of fun. You're a
Yes.
good guy. And you know what? I want to wish you all the luck in the world with your podcast. I hope you do really well.
Thank you.
Hopefully you're the next Joe Rogan of finance.
There we go. Thank you. Appreciate it. And that concludes the Wright Flow Show this episode. Thank you everybody for watching, and God bless. Thank you.